Welcome back to Facts Intrigue and the third and final chapter of our series, The Final Diagnosis: What Ended the Lives of US Presidents. In this episode, we explore the lives and final moments of America's modern presidents, from the dawn of the 20th century to the leaders who shaped the modern era. This chapter begins with Theodore Roosevelt, the man who carried the nation into the progressive era with his boundless energy and determination. From then on, we follow the lives of presidents who navigated world wars, global conflicts, economic crises, and social revolutions, leaving behind legacies that continue to influence our nation today. What challenges did they face, and what ultimately brought their journeys to an end? Join us as we uncover the medical mysteries, personal struggles, and historical contexts that defined their final days. If you haven't already, be sure to check out parts 1 and 2 of this series, where we explored the lives of earlier presidents. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Facts Intrigue for more fascinating dives into history. It may seem like a small gesture, but it makes a world of difference in helping our channel grow and bringing intriguing stories like these to more viewers. Now, let's begin with the 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president of the United States, was a larger-than-life figure whose energy, determination, and vision left an indelible mark on the nation. Born on October 27, 1858, in New York City, Roosevelt overcame severe childhood illnesses, including asthma, to become one of America's most dynamic leaders. Known for his motto, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," Roosevelt was a man of action, whether on the battlefield, in the wilderness, or in the halls of government. Roosevelt's political rise was meteoric. After serving as New York's governor and vice president, he became the youngest person to assume the presidency at just 42, following the assassination of William McKinley in 1901. His presidency, which lasted until 1909, ushered in the progressive era, marked by sweeping reforms aimed at curbing corporate power, protecting consumers, and conserving the nation's natural resources. Roosevelt championed the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act, laying the groundwork for modern food safety. He also expanded America's national parks and forests, preserving millions of acres for future generations. On the world stage, Roosevelt's leadership was equally bold. He played a key role in constructing the Panama Canal, which revolutionized global trade, and was instrumental in mediating the Russo-Japanese War, earning him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1906, the first American to receive the honor. After leaving office, Roosevelt remained deeply active, embarking on adventures that cemented his reputation as an explorer and naturalist. His famous expedition to the Amazon rainforest was both groundbreaking and grueling, with Roosevelt contracting tropical illnesses that permanently weakened his health. In his later years, Roosevelt's health declined further, exacerbated by the loss of his son Quentin during World War I. On January 6, 1919, at the age of 60, Theodore Roosevelt passed away in his sleep from a blood clot that traveled to his lungs. Vice President Thomas R. Marshall famously said, "Death had to take Roosevelt sleeping, for if he had been awake, there would have been a fight." Theodore Roosevelt's legacy endures as a testament to ambition, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of progress. He was not only a president, but a force of nature who reshaped the American presidency and left an impact that continues to inspire. William Howard Taft, the 27th President of the United States, holds a unique place in history as the only person to lead both the executive and judicial branches of government. Born on September 15, 1857, in Cincinnati, Ohio, Taft followed a career path shaped by his deep commitment to the law and public service. Despite his own reluctance, he was handpicked by his close friend and predecessor, Theodore Roosevelt, to succeed him in the White House. Serving as president from 1909 to 1913, Taft's term was marked by significant challenges and accomplishments. While less flamboyant than Roosevelt, Taft worked diligently to enforce antitrust laws, strengthen federal oversight of commerce, and expand U.S. influence abroad through his policy of dollar diplomacy. However, his presidency was often overshadowed by a public rift with Roosevelt, who criticized Taft for not fully embracing progressive reforms. This division split the Republican Party and contributed to Taft's defeat in the 1912 election. After leaving the White House, Taft found his true calling in the judiciary. In 1921, he was appointed Chief Justice of the United States, becoming the only former president to serve on the Supreme Court, a role he cherished far more than the presidency. As Chief Justice, Taft left a lasting impact by modernizing the federal judiciary and advocating for the construction of the Supreme Court building, a symbol of its independence. Taft struggled with obesity and related health issues throughout his life. By the time of his death on March 8, 1930, at the age of 72, he had lost significant weight but was plagued by heart disease. Taft was the first president to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery, a fitting honor for a man who served his country with dedication in two branches of government. William Howard Taft's legacy is one of quiet but enduring contributions to the law and governance, embodying a different kind of presidential leadership, one rooted in a steady hand and a deep respect for justice. Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States, led the nation through one of its most transformative and tumultuous periods. Born on December 28, 1856, in Virginia, Wilson's early life was shaped by the Civil War and Reconstruction. A scholar and former president of Princeton University, Wilson entered politics as the governor of New Jersey before ascending to the presidency in 1913. Wilson's 2 terms in office were defined by sweeping reforms at home and unprecedented challenges abroad. Domestically, he championed the progressive movement, enacting major legislation like the Federal Reserve Act, which established the central banking system, and the Clayton Antitrust Act, strengthening protections against monopolies. He also supported labor reforms and women's suffrage, which culminated in the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. However, it was Wilson's leadership during World War I that would define his presidency. Initially advocating neutrality, he eventually led the United States into the conflict in 1917, framing it as a fight to make the world safe for democracy. After the war, Wilson spearheaded the creation of the League of Nations, a precursor to the United Nations, though the US Senate ultimately rejected membership, a blow to his vision of global cooperation. Wilson's second term was marred by personal and political struggles. In 1919, while campaigning tirelessly for the League of Nations, Wilson suffered a debilitating stroke, which left him partially paralyzed and greatly impaired. For the remainder of his presidency, much of the nation's governance fell to his wife, Edith Wilson, who acted as a gatekeeper and intermediary, sparking debates over whether she effectively became the first female president in practice. Woodrow Wilson left office in 1921, retiring to a quiet life in Washington, D.C. His health continued to decline, and on February 3, 1924, he passed away at the age of 67 from complications related to his stroke. Wilson's legacy is one of idealism and complexity, a leader who sought to reshape the world through diplomacy and progress, but whose personal struggles and controversial decisions left a mixed historical record. Before we continue our journey through the lives and legacies of America's presidents, we'd like to take a quick moment to invite you to subscribe to Facts Intrigue. If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with others who love uncovering history's mysteries. Your support helps us create more fascinating content, so thank you. And now, let's move on to our next president, the man who followed Woodrow Wilson in leading the nation, Warren G. Harding. Warren G. Harding, the 29th President of the United States, served during a time of transition and post-war recovery. Born on November 2, 1865, in Ohio, Harding worked as a newspaper editor before rising through the ranks of state and national politics. Known for his affable personality and easygoing demeanor, Harding won the presidency in 1920 on a promise of a return to normalcy, appealing to a nation weary from World War I and Wilson's reform-driven era. Harding's presidency, from 1921 to 1923, focused on rebuilding the economy and reducing government regulation. His administration promoted pro-business policies and worked to reduce taxes while fostering international cooperation through the Washington Naval Conference, which sought to limit naval arms races among global powers. However, Harding's tenure was overshadowed by scandals involving members of his administration. The most infamous of these, the Teapot Dome scandal, exposed corruption at the highest levels of government, though Harding himself was not directly implicated. In the summer of 1923, while on a cross-country goodwill tour, Harding fell gravely ill. He passed away suddenly on August 2, 1923, in San Francisco, likely from a heart attack or stroke, though rumors of foul play swirled in the wake of his death. He was the 6th US president to die in office, and his sudden passing shocked the nation. Warren G. Harding remains a figure of contradiction, remembered for his efforts to stabilize the nation after the Great War, but also for the shadow of corruption that marred his legacy. While there's no evidence that Harding himself was involved in or benefited from these scandals, his reputation suffered greatly because he appointed and trusted corrupt officials. Harding reportedly confided to a friend, "I have no trouble with my enemies, but my friends, they're the ones that keep me walking the floor at nights." His sudden death in 1923, while the scandals were unfolding, meant that he never faced the full fallout of these events. His successor, Calvin Coolidge, worked to restore the public's trust in the presidency. Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States, rose to prominence as a man of few words but strong principles. Born on July 4, 1872, in Vermont, Coolidge is the only US president born on Independence Day, a fitting detail for a leader known for his devotion to American ideals. Coolidge became vice president under Warren G. Harding and assumed the presidency in August 1923, following Harding's sudden death. Coolidge quickly set about restoring public trust in the government, distancing himself from the scandals of the Harding administration. His calm demeanor and reputation for integrity earned him the nickname Silent Cal. Elected in his own right in 1924, Coolidge's presidency was marked by economic growth and the flourishing of the Roaring Twenties. He championed small government, low taxes, and business-friendly policies, believing that prosperity was best achieved through limited federal intervention. While Coolidge's era was one of relative peace and stability, his administration largely avoided addressing deeper societal issues such as racial inequality and the growing economic disparity that would contribute to the Great Depression. Coolidge surprised the nation by choosing not to run for re-election in 1928, retiring instead to private life in Northampton, Massachusetts. His post-presidency was brief, as Coolidge passed away suddenly on January 5, 1933, at the age of 60, from a heart attack. Though often overshadowed by the turbulence of the era that followed, Calvin Coolidge remains a symbol of restraint and prudence, his presidency a reflection of a simpler, more optimistic time in American history. Herbert Hoover, the 31st President of the United States, entered office with high hopes and a sterling reputation as a humanitarian and engineer. Born on August 10, 1874, in Iowa, Hoover was the first president born west of the Mississippi River. Orphaned at a young age, he overcame significant hardships, eventually becoming a successful mining engineer and a global hero for his efforts to provide food relief during World War I. Elected in 1928, Hoover's presidency began with promise as the nation basked in the prosperity of the Roaring Twenties. However, less than a year into his term, the stock market crash of 1929 plunged the country into the Great Depression, the worst economic crisis in US history. Despite Hoover's efforts to combat the crisis through public works projects, like the construction of the Hoover Dam, and attempts to stabilize the banking system, his policies were seen as too limited and ineffective. Hoover's reluctance to provide direct federal aid to individuals earned him criticism and contributed to widespread discontent. Shantytowns of the homeless were derisively called Hoovervilles, symbolizing the public's frustration with his leadership. After leaving office in 1933, Hoover spent decades rebuilding his reputation, becoming a respected elder statesman. He wrote extensively and worked on government commissions under later presidents, offering advice on efficiency and administration. Hoover passed away on October 20, 1964, at the age of 90, from complications of colon cancer. His long post-presidency allowed him to see his legacy reassessed, shifting from the image of a failed president to recognition of his earlier humanitarian achievements and contributions to public service. Herbert Hoover's life serves as a testament to resilience and dedication, though his presidency remains forever tied to the darkest days of the Great Depression. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, holds a unique place in American history as the only president to serve 4 terms. Born on January 30, 1882, in Hyde Park, New York, Franklin was a distant cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, the nation's 26th president. The connection didn't end there. Franklin married his 5th cousin once removed, Eleanor Roosevelt, who happened to be Theodore's niece. Together, Franklin and Eleanor formed one of the most influential political partnerships in U.S. history, with Eleanor becoming a trailblazing First Lady and champion of human rights. Elected in 1932, during the darkest days of the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt promised Americans a New Deal, ushering in an era of sweeping reforms and public works programs designed to restore hope and revive the economy. Through his fireside chats, Roosevelt brought comfort and confidence to millions, speaking directly to the American people in their homes during times of great uncertainty. Roosevelt's presidency was not only defined by domestic recovery, but also by global leadership. He guided the United States through the trials of World War II, forging alliances, overseeing the mobilization of industry and troops, and laying the foundation for victory against the Axis powers. His vision for a post-war world included the creation of the United Nations, aiming to promote international peace and cooperation. Behind his public image of strength, Roosevelt battled significant health challenges. In 1921, he was stricken with polio, which left him paralyzed from the waist down. Determined to lead despite his disability, FDR rarely allowed himself to be seen in a wheelchair, mastering techniques to appear standing and mobile during public events, maintaining an image of vitality and resolve. On April 12, 1945, just months into his unprecedented 4th term, Roosevelt passed away from a massive cerebral hemorrhage at his retreat in Warm Springs, Georgia. He was 63 years old. His sudden death shocked the nation, which had come to rely on his steady leadership through 2 of the most tumultuous periods in American history. Franklin D. Roosevelt's legacy endures as one of resilience, innovation, and optimism. He reshaped the presidency and left an indelible mark as a leader who guided the nation through its most challenging crises while redefining what it meant to lead on the global stage. Harry S. Truman, the 33rd President of the United States, took office under extraordinary circumstances, inheriting the presidency upon the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt on April 12, 1945. Born on May 8, 1884 in Missouri, Truman's rise to power was unexpected, but his steady leadership would leave an enduring mark on the nation and the world. Truman's presidency began in the final stages of World War II. Within months of taking office, he made one of the most consequential decisions in history, to use atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, effectively ending the war with Japan in August 1945. This controversial decision ushered in a new era of nuclear geopolitics and marked the dawn of the Cold War. On the domestic front, Truman championed what he called the Fair Deal, a set of policies aimed at expanding social programs, improving labor rights, and addressing civil rights issues. While his proposals met mixed success, he became the first president to desegregate the armed forces, setting the stage for the modern civil rights movement. Truman's foreign policy initiatives also defined his presidency. The Truman Doctrine, announced in 1947, established a policy of containing communism and providing support to nations resisting authoritarian regimes. Coupled with the Marshall Plan, which rebuilt war-torn Europe, Truman solidified America's role as a global leader. Despite a contentious re-election campaign in 1948, widely expected to end in his defeat, Truman pulled off a stunning upset victory, securing another term in the White House. His famous campaign against the Do-Nothing Congress resonated with voters, cementing his reputation as a determined and plain-spoken leader. After leaving office in 1953, Truman returned to his modest home in Missouri, living simply and without a presidential pension. which wasn't established until later. Truman passed away on December 26, 1972, at the age of 88, from complications of pneumonia. Harry S. Truman's legacy is one of decisive leadership during a transformative time in history. His presidency laid the foundation for the United States' role as a superpower, and his straightforward, no-nonsense approach earned him respect that grew with time. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States, was a war hero turned statesman who led the nation through an era of prosperity and global tension. Born on October 14, 1890, in Denison, Texas, Eisenhower, nicknamed Ike, rose to prominence as the Supreme Allied Commander during World War II, orchestrating the D-Day invasion and securing victory in Europe. His leadership on the battlefield catapulted him into the political spotlight, and he was elected president in 1952, defeating Adlai Stevenson in a landslide. Eisenhower's presidency, spanning from 1953 to 1961, is remembered for its focus on peace, prosperity, and stability. Domestically, he championed infrastructure projects, most notably the creation of the interstate highway system, which revolutionized American transportation and commerce. His administration also saw the establishment of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, during the height of the space race with the Soviet Union. On the world stage, Eisenhower navigated the complexities of the Cold War, using his military expertise to prevent escalation while maintaining a policy of containment against communism. The Eisenhower Doctrine pledged U.S. support for Middle Eastern nations resisting communist aggression, further solidifying America's role as a global superpower. Despite his military background, Eisenhower famously warned against the growing influence of the military-industrial complex in his farewell address, urging the nation to guard against excessive militarization. Eisenhower's personal life was marked by health challenges, including several heart attacks during and after his presidency. Despite his illnesses, he remained a calm and steady leader, beloved for his reassuring demeanor and ability to unite Americans across party lines. Dwight D. Eisenhower passed away on March 28, 1969, at the age of 78, from congestive heart failure. His legacy as a war hero and a president who brought stability and growth to post-war America remains one of the most enduring in U.S. history. While illness and natural causes claimed the lives of many presidents, some met their fate in more mysterious and sudden ways. These losses stand out through time, not just as tragedies, but as moments that altered the nation's course. 4 presidents met their end at the hands of another. Abraham Lincoln was the first, fatally shot by John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theater in 1865. While he survived for hours after the initial wound, the bullet lodged in his brain left no real hope for recovery. The nation mourned as he passed the next morning. And now, we come to the shocking assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963, an event that remains one of the most thoroughly studied moments in history. While Kennedy faced a lifetime of health challenges, among them Addison's disease and chronic back pain, there's one lesser-known detail about that day that may have played a tragic role. On November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was wearing his back brace, a device he relied on to manage his chronic pain from years of injuries and complications. The brace held him upright, providing the support he needed, but at a cost. When the first bullet struck him in the upper back, the brace prevented him from slumping forward, holding him upright in the open car. Medical experts have since noted that this posture left him tragically exposed, making him vulnerable to the second fatal shot. Though Kennedy's back brace is rarely mentioned, it has become a point of analysis in understanding that fateful moment. A small, yet significant factor that may have changed the course of history. In a way, it's a poignant reminder of the hidden struggles Kennedy carried with him, right up until his final moments. Despite his promise and potential, Kennedy's presidency was tragically cut short. On November 22, 1963, while riding in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas, Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald, according to official accounts. His death shocked the world and left a lasting sense of loss for what could have been. He was just 46 years old. John F. Kennedy's legacy endures as a symbol of youthful vigor, visionary leadership, and the enduring hope for a brighter future. His words, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," continue to inspire generations of Americans to this day. Before we move on, who is your favorite president in history and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to know what you think. Also, would you be sure to subscribe if you have not already done so? Lyndon Baines Johnson, the 36th President of the United States, assumed office during one of the most turbulent periods in American history. Born on August 27, 1908, in Stonewall, Texas, Johnson grew up in modest circumstances, a background that shaped his lifelong commitment to improving the lives of ordinary Americans. Johnson became vice president under John F. Kennedy in 1961 and took the oath of office on November 22, 1963, following Kennedy's assassination. Sworn in aboard Air Force One, Johnson faced the daunting task of uniting a grieving nation and carrying forward Kennedy's ambitious agenda. His presidency, lasting from 1963 to 1969, is best known for its sweeping domestic reforms under the banner of the Great Society. Johnson championed landmark legislation, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which aimed to dismantle systemic racism and ensure equal rights for all Americans. He also launched Medicare and Medicaid, transforming healthcare access for millions of elderly and low-income citizens. However, Johnson's presidency was overshadowed by the escalating conflict in Vietnam. His decision to dramatically increase U.S. troop involvement and his handling of the war drew fierce criticism, dividing the nation and overshadowing his domestic achievements. By 1968, the protests, violence, and growing opposition to the war led Johnson to the stunning announcement that he would not seek re-election. After leaving office in 1969, Johnson retired to his Texas ranch, where he spent his final years reflecting on his legacy and working on his memoirs. His health, long compromised by heavy smoking and stress, quickly deteriorated. On January 22, 1973, Johnson died of a heart attack at the age of 64. Lyndon B. Johnson's presidency remains a study in contrasts, an era of profound progress at home but deepening conflict abroad. His vision for a more just and equitable America lives on in the programs and laws he helped create, even as his tenure is remembered for the lasting scars of the Vietnam War. Richard Milhous Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, was one of the most controversial yet influential leaders in American history. Born on January 9, 1913, in Yorba Linda, California, Nixon's humble beginnings shaped his reputation as a tenacious fighter who worked his way to the top. Nixon first gained national prominence as a congressman and senator during the early Cold War, making a name for himself as a staunch anti-communist. After serving as vice president under Dwight D. Eisenhower from 1953 to 1961, Nixon lost the 1960 presidential election to John F. Kennedy. Many thought his political career was over, but in a dramatic comeback, he won the presidency in 1968 and was re-elected in 1972. Nixon's presidency, from 1969 to 1974, is remembered for its mix of landmark achievements and profound controversies. On the world stage, Nixon sought to ease Cold War tensions through groundbreaking diplomacy. He opened relations with China in 1972, a historic visit that reshaped global geopolitics, and pursued arms control agreements with the Soviet Union through the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT. Domestically, Nixon's administration created the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and expanded civil rights initiatives, including affirmative action. However, Nixon's presidency unraveled due to the Watergate scandal, a political scandal involving a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters and the subsequent cover-up by members of his administration. As the scandal deepened, tapes revealing Nixon's involvement in the cover-up came to light, leading to bipartisan calls for his impeachment. Facing almost certain removal from office, Nixon became the first and only U.S. president to resign, stepping down on August 9, 1974. Vice President Gerald Ford assumed the presidency and later pardoned Nixon, sparing him from potential criminal charges. In his post-presidency, Nixon worked to rebuild his reputation, authoring books on foreign policy and serving as an elder statesman. He passed away on April 22, 1994, at the age of 81 from complications following a stroke. Richard Nixon's legacy is complex, a leader who achieved significant strides in diplomacy and domestic policy, but whose presidency will forever be overshadowed by the scandal that ended it. Gerald Rudolph Ford, the 38th President of the United States, holds the distinction of being the only person to assume the presidency without being elected as either president or vice president. Born on July 14, 1913, in Omaha, Nebraska, Ford grew up in Michigan, where he gained a reputation for integrity and service. Ford became vice president in 1973 after Spiro Agnew's resignation and assumed the presidency on August 9, 1974. Following Richard Nixon's resignation during the Watergate scandal. His presidency, lasting until January 20, 1977, was defined by efforts to heal a nation deeply divided by scandal and war. Ford's controversial decision to pardon Nixon dominated his early tenure, overshadowing his achievements. Despite this, Ford worked to restore public trust in the presidency, managed economic challenges like inflation, and oversaw the final withdrawal of American troops from Vietnam. After narrowly losing the 1976 election to Jimmy Carter, Ford retired to private life, becoming a respected elder statesman. He passed away on December 26, 2006, at the age of 93 from cardiovascular disease, making him one of the longest-living US presidents. Gerald Ford's legacy is one of integrity and service, remembered for his efforts to bring stability during a turbulent time in American history. Now, for those of you who are keeping count, after President Ford, the 38th president, our 39th president is Jimmy Carter, who as of this video's creation in November 2024, is still with us at an incredible 100 years old. Since this series focuses on presidents who are no longer with us, we'll skip over President Carter and move on to President Ronald Reagan, the 40th President of the United States. Ronald Wilson Reagan, the 40th President of the United States, was a former Hollywood actor who became one of the most transformative leaders of the 20th century. Born on February 6, 1911, in Tampico, Illinois, Reagan began his career as a radio broadcaster and film actor before transitioning to politics. Elected in 1980, Reagan's presidency from 1981 to 1989 ushered in a new era of conservative leadership. Known as the Great Communicator, Reagan championed policies of tax cuts, deregulation, and a strong national defense, often referred to as Reaganomics. His presidency saw economic recovery and a resurgence of national pride. On the global stage, Reagan took a hardline stance against the Soviet Union, famously declaring, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." His efforts to end the Cold War included landmark arms reduction treaties and fostering a relationship with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. In 1981, Reagan survived an assassination attempt, a moment that solidified his reputation for resilience. After leaving office, Reagan announced in 1994 that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He passed away on June 5, 2004, at the age of 93, from complications related to pneumonia. Ronald Reagan's legacy remains polarizing, but undeniably impactful, marked by his optimism, leadership, and role in reshaping America's political landscape. George Herbert Walker Bush, the 41st President of the United States, dedicated his life to public service as a war hero, diplomat, and statesman. Born on June 12, 1924, in Milton, Massachusetts, Bush served as a Navy pilot during World War II, earning distinction as one of the youngest aviators in the conflict. Elected in 1988, Bush's presidency, from 1989 to 1993, was marked by major global changes. He led the nation through the end of the Cold War and oversaw the peaceful reunification of Germany. His leadership during the Gulf War in 1991, which repelled Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, earned him international acclaim. Domestically, Bush faced economic challenges and rising deficits, leading to his controversial decision to raise taxes, despite his famous campaign promise, "Read my lips, no new taxes." This decision, along with a struggling economy, contributed to his defeat in the 1992 election to Bill Clinton. After leaving office, Bush focused on humanitarian work, often partnering with his successor, Bill Clinton, on disaster relief efforts. He passed away on November 30th, 2018, at the age of 94, from complications of vascular Parkinsonism. Bush's legacy is one of dedication to service and diplomacy, remembered for his steady hand during a time of profound global change. As we wrap up this three-part journey into the lives and legacies of America's presidents, let's take a moment to reflect on some fascinating facts and tidbits that tie all these leaders together. Did you know that certain states have a reputation for producing presidents? For instance, Virginia, the birthplace of democracy in America, leads the pack with 8 presidents hailing from the Old Dominion, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. This dominance in the early years earned Virginia the nickname the Mother of Presidents. Not far behind is Ohio, often called the Mother of Modern Presidents, with 7 presidents born there: Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, James A. Garfield, Benjamin Harrison, William McKinley, William Howard Taft, and Warren G. Harding. Ohio's pivotal role in 19th and early 20th century politics made it a presidential powerhouse. New York comes next. New York, often called the Empire State, has the distinction of being the birthplace or political home of 7 U.S. presidents, the most of any state except Virginia. Starting with Martin Van Buren, the 8th president and the first to be born a U.S. citizen, to Donald Trump, the 45th president, New York's influence on the presidency spans centuries. In between, we find notable figures like Millard Fillmore, who stepped into the role after Zachary Taylor's death, and Chester A. Arthur, a surprise reformer despite his association with political machines. Here's a fascinating presidential milestone. Grover Cleveland held the unique distinction of being the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Or at least, he did, until Donald Trump joined him. Cleveland served as both the 22nd and 24th president, leading the nation from 1885 to 1889, and then again from 1893 to 1897. Now, fast forward over a century, and Donald Trump becomes the 2nd president to achieve this rare feat. After serving as the 45th president from 2017 to 2021, Trump was re-elected in 2024, making him the 47th president of the United States. This makes both Cleveland and Trump part of an extremely exclusive club in U.S. presidential history. Also from New York, we have the 2 Roosevelts: Theodore, a progressive force and conservationist, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, who guided the nation through the Great Depression and World War II. New York's contribution to the presidency reflects its role as a hub of political, economic, and cultural power, a testament to the state's enduring significance in shaping America's history. Massachusetts follows with 3 presidents, including John Adams, John Quincy Adams, and John F. Kennedy. And there you have it, an incredible journey through the lives, legacies, and final moments of U.S. presidents who shaped the nation. From the Virginia dynasty that led the early years of the Republic to the modern leaders navigating wars, crises, and innovation, each president's story is a chapter in the larger narrative of American history. Whether it's Grover Cleveland and Donald Trump serving non-consecutive terms, the astounding number of presidents from Ohio and Virginia, or the enduring symbols of leadership these figures represent, the presidency remains a role of immense significance and sacrifice. As we close this series, we hope you've enjoyed uncovering the fascinating insights and historical truths about the individuals who have held the nation's highest office. Each of their stories, full of triumphs, challenges, and humanity, offers a unique window into the evolving story of America. If you haven't watched Part 1 and Part 2 of our Final Diagnosis series, we encourage you to go back and explore the journeys of the presidents who shaped the early years of our nation and those who bridged the gap to modern times. Together, they complete this comprehensive look at the lives and legacies of the presidents who are no longer with us. Before we go, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Facts Intrigue for more captivating explorations of history, mysteries, and beyond. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us which president's story surprised you the most, or suggest a topic you'd like us to cover in the future. And with that, we officially close the book on the final diagnosis, a series honoring the lives, legacies, and lasting impacts of America's presidents. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through history.